Now, there are a lot of reasons why Seattle is a great place to live. We've got great schools over here, a super robust job market with healthcare and the tech industry, so many different types of jobs and high-paying jobs in this area. You've got the great outdoors in the Pacific Northwest. It's hard to beat being in the outdoors than when you're in the Pacific Northwest. Whether you want to be in the mountains and go snowshoeing or skiing or snowboarding or mountain biking, or you want to float down a river, or you want to go kayaking, you want to head over to a lake and go swimming and take out the boat, or you want to go over to Puget Sound and take in all that offers and head over on a ferry. There is so much to do outdoors here as well. So there's a lot that draws people in to the Seattle area here when they're thinking about making a move out of their current state. But I've made a lot of videos on what's great about this area, and I just mentioned a few, but in this video, I really want to go over some reasons why you may not want to move to Seattle, some of the drawbacks to living in this area, as I think it's really important to compare and contrast and also look at those cons before you make that decision on making that move over here. So let's jump into it. If you haven't already, feel free to subscribe to the channel. I love helping you guys out when you're moving over this way. I am an active real estate agent over here, so if you're making the move over to the Seattle metro area and you need some help with that move and purchasing a home, feel free to reach out to me here at my info on the screen. Be more than happy to help guide you through that process. But like I said, we're gonna go over 6 things here, 6 drawbacks or cons to living in the Seattle area. So number one I'm gonna start with is it's pretty old over here. Now it depends exactly where you are. The Seattle metro area is a very large area, but we have a lot of old homes over here. I hear it a lot from my clients that are moving here from places like Texas is a really popular one, somewhere where a lot of the subdivisions are very uniform. They're very new homes. Every home looks pretty much the same. And then they come over here and look at some of the neighborhoods, specifically on the west side of Seattle Metro, and realize it is a completely different feel. You can have homes that are 100, 120, 130 years old in this area. That is not uncommon at all. Got a lot of homes built in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. So there's a wide range of what you can get over here. You can head into a neighborhood and there's 8 different architecture styles in that same neighborhood and a lot of different types of floor plans and curb appeal and all this kind of stuff that's very, very different from house to house within the same neighborhood. So for some people that's a drawback because they're looking for somewhere that's pretty uniform and just clean and just new and the same throughout, where here you're gonna have some older homes. And like I said, this is geared more towards the west side. The closer you get to the water, so cities like Seattle, of course, is very old. If you go further north and you're talking about places like Edmonds and Linwood and Mukilteo and Everett, there's a lot of neighborhoods in there on the west side that are gonna, be very old homes. You've got a lot of craftsman, colonial style homes that are, 1910, 1920, 1930s homes in those areas. Now, if you're coming over here and you're saying, hey, that's not really my thing, I really want new construction, there are some options for new construction over here, of course. The further east you head, the more new construction you have. So we've got the west side, which is kind of Seattle, and then you've got what we call our east side, which is east of Lake Washington. That's cities like Bellevue and Kirkland and Redmond, Maple Valley, Issaquah, Sammamish, some of these cities on the east side. You're gonna have a lot more new construction on that east side than you would on the west side. So if you're focusing on new construction, you're gonna have a better chance finding that there on that east side, and there's plenty of neighborhoods that have it through there as well. But if you want something with water views on the Puget Sound, most likely it's gonna be a bit of an older home. Now there's some that are, one-off, somebody tore down, an old existing home and built a new construction home, so there's some one-offs, but you're not gonna have uniform new construction neighborhoods with Puget Sound views. It just doesn't exist. They're all established older neighborhoods at this point. All right, and con number 2 along the same line is the higher home prices here in the Seattle area. For those of you coming from pretty much anywhere other than California or New York, it's probably going to be higher home prices here than where you're coming from and what you're used to. The median home price here in the Seattle metro area is $722,000. Now notice that I said the Seattle metro area, not just the city of Seattle. Seattle metro area is a huge area. It depends where you are and what that median home price is. Some cities on the low end will be hovering around $550, $500 for that median home price, like if you go down south towards Tacoma. And then, on the high end, on your east side, like Bellevue and Kirkland and Redmond, those places are gonna be 1.5 million or more for the median home prices. So Depends where you are. There's a lot of, a lot of them in the middle, 700, 800, 900,000 for median home prices. So stuff all over the board. It depends how close you want to be to Seattle or Bellevue, the type of neighborhood, and of course size of home and all that kind of stuff. But median home prices in Seattle Metro are about 722,000. So keep that in mind. Now, a lot of people come over here taking jobs that are much higher paying jobs, so it offsets that and they're not too worried about it. Or they're coming from California or another place that pays state income tax and come here to Washington, and hey, you've got no state income tax. So you've got more of your monthly budget that can go towards a mortgage if you're not, if you're saving a bit on taxes. All right, and con number 3 for some people is you're pretty much gonna need a car if you move over here. Now, there's a few exceptions to this. If you're looking for something super walkable, you want to depend on public transportation and just walking everywhere or using your bike, there's some spots in Seattle. If you're downtown Seattle, South Lake Union, Belltown, those are going to be some really walkable areas where you could potentially walk to your job. If you're working at, say, a Facebook or a Google or an Amazon, there's, locations where you could walk to your job, and a ton of restaurants around that you could walk to. So those spots can be pretty walkable. Outside of that, if you want to live in the suburbs, you obviously are going to have to buy a car. Public transportation is not good enough yet here for you to rely on public transportation every single day if you don't have a car and you're living in the suburbs. Say you have to commute into Seattle or Bellevue. Now, we do have the light rail system, which is our train system. It's expanding further and further north. It's just on the west side right now. So, it's just Seattle and directly north and directly south. They're bringing it over to Bellevue, but there's going to be plenty of areas that the light rail does not service, and you're not going to be able to get to it unless you drive to the light rail and park there. So in terms of being in walking distance to the light rail station, in order to depend on that, you're going to have to find a neighborhood right along that rail line. Otherwise, you're likely going to be depending on a car here in the Seattle area. All right, number 4 is the homelessness that we have in this area. Now, what's important to know is it's mostly in the city of Seattle. You're going to see it downtown. You're going to see it by the freeways. Now, what comes along with this, and what the real issue is here, is the streets get lined with trash and garbage. They don't get cleaned up. You can walk around Seattle and see needles on the street. There's tent cities everywhere, and the city obviously doesn't do anything about them. They let them just kind of put up tents wherever they want at this point in Seattle. So if you're somebody that's thinking about moving downtown to Seattle, that's definitely something you need to factor in. It's got a lot of your larger downtown problems, and they don't do a great job of cleaning it up. Hopefully they will down the road a little bit better, but as of right now, that's something you're going to have to deal with. Now, if you're living in a suburb, most suburbs, you're not going to have this issue whatsoever. You won't have a homelessness issue in your city if you're living outside of the city of Seattle. There's a few cities here and there that will have some pockets, maybe by the freeway, with a little bit of a homelessness issue, but for the most part, most of these suburbs, it's not something you're gonna, even think about on a daily basis, because unless you're driving into Seattle every single day for work, that's really where you're gonna see it the most. But if you are commuting to Seattle every day for work, you're walking around down there, or you wanna live downtown in Seattle, that is something to keep in mind that, is very common there in the Seattle area, and can, of course, bother a lot of people with everything that goes along with that homelessness issue. All right, and point number 5 here, con number 5, is the weather. Now, this is super, super specific to who you are and what you like. Here in the Seattle area, we have a much more mild climate than a lot of the country. You can live other places where your summers are gonna be over 110 degrees constantly, or your winters are gonna be in the teens and piled with snow. For the most part, you're not gonna get any of that kind of stuff here. In the summer, you're on average gonna be mid 70s to mid 80s for most of the summer. You're gonna get some streaks here, and it seems to be getting a little worse every year, but you're gonna get some streaks here where you might get into the 90s, mid 90s for a week, something like that. But it's much more doable than some of those really hot climates. And then on the flip side of that, as you get to the winter, you're gonna be, 40s on average, low to mid 40s is kind of that average temperature for the winter. You might get piled, a quote unquote snowstorm once a year where it might last for a few days and then melt away and back to your regular life. So you're not going to get piled with snow all winter long. Now, what people do have an issue with here, that trade-off for not having those extreme temperatures for the most part, you're going to get a much cloudier, gray kind of climate. Outside of the summer's super pleasant, sun constantly and absolutely gorgeous. Outside of those summer months, you're gonna get a lot of gray weather. So a lot of overcast days or weeks up to weeks at a time where you're not gonna see the sun very much. We do get a good amount of rain. Now, In terms of the average, the average annual rainfall, we're not up there super high. There's a lot of cities that are a bit higher than us. That's mostly because we don't get torrential downpours here. It's more of a misty, drizzly rain for the most part. So we do have a lot of days of rain. So it's important to kind of keep that in mind. A lot of people don't have an umbrella around here because you're usually not getting poured on. It's usually misty and drizzly and all that kind of stuff. So, but that's the trade-off there and it bugs some people that come from super sunshiny states is it's going to be gray here. It's going to be misty and drizzly quite a bit, especially in the mornings. So that's something to think about. Seasonal depression is a thing over here for some people. So something to keep in mind when you're moving over this way. I've had people move here from all over the country. Some that, have struggled with it a little bit, some that haven't struggled with it at all, and all the trade-offs of being here in the Pacific Northwest far outweigh that issue, but that is something to keep in mind for sure. All right, and con number 6 kind of goes along with this on the weather front, and this is wildfires. So here in the summer, you're gonna get wildfire smoke, and this is another thing that seems to be getting worse every year. You're gonna have days or weeks at a time where you're going to get some smoke blown over here. Now, if you're living in the Seattle metro area, unless you're super far out, which really isn't Seattle metro at that point, if you're living in the Seattle metro area, you're not going to have to deal with wildfires in the terms of having to evacuate your home, but you're going to get smoke that's blown over here, whether it's from up north or on the east side of the mountains in eastern Washington or from down south. You're going to get smoke through here in the summer. We've had it today in October. The last couple of days we had it really late kind of summer this year when it came to wildfire smoke. We went June, July, August, most of September with hardly anything, almost nothing in terms of wildfire smoke. And then it started to come mid to late September, and then here in October, we've had it a little bit. So there are going to be days where maybe you don't want to walk outside because the smoke is so heavy and the air quality is so poor. So just keep that in mind, that is something you can deal with over here in those summer months. Usually it's in the summer months and not usually in October, but we've had a super late summer here this year, so you can experience it a little bit. It's not going to completely shoot your summer in the foot. I mean, there's going to be plenty of days, obviously, where it's absolutely gorgeous, but there are going to be some stretches, most likely, where you're going to have to deal with some wildfire smoke in this area. So just something also important to know. But that wraps up my list here. 6 things that you got to know, cons that you got to be aware of before you make the move over here. Weigh those pros and cons and make that decision. Like I said, I'm an active real estate agent over here, so if you're making the move, you need some help making that move and that transition and looking for a home to purchase here in this area, feel free to reach out to me. Like I said, be more than happy to help you out.